When you tell a child to finish what they have eaten so that they don't get into trouble, they start eating and then they start getting full. And so now their body is telling them to stop, but their mind is telling them, if I don't finish this, I'm going to be in trouble. And so what happens? They eat past the point of fullness, ignoring completely what their body is telling them. And what this does to us as adults is it puts us in a position where we have a difficulty recognizing when we're hungry, because we end up relying on external cues instead of internal cues. Have you ever found yourself opening the fridge time and time again and you don't even know what you're looking for? And maybe you're feeling tired, maybe you're feeling bored, maybe you're feeling anxious. What I'm here to tell you today is that you're not weak. In fact, you're wired. And today we're going to dive into emotional eating and how actually it is not just about willpower, but in fact it's linked to your biology, physiology, and sometimes a spiritual hunger that needs to be fed. So today we're going to talk about how faith actually offers wisdom as to how we can nourish our bodies and our souls as well. You're listening to Healthy Hypocrites. This is the show where we talk about the messy intersection between faith and health. And I'm your host, Tumi, a dietitian and lactation consultant and a follower of Christ. And today I'm here to share a message with you that health is not about perfection, but rather about intention, honesty, and grace. And each week we will unpack the scientific and the spiritual aspects of different topics so that we can live a whole life and not just a healthy life. But before we get into anything, I want us to break the ice. So let's break the ice. I am going to pull out something I call the confession jar. So on the note of vulnerability, I'm going to pop out a fishy out of here based on today's topic. And you guys cannot make me answer this alone, because I want you, if you're listening to this through a podcasting channel, send me a message with your answer. If you're watching this YouTube video, then leave your answer down below. Okay. So these are random, guys, all random, by the way. So the question is, do you ever judge yourself for overeating? Do you ever judge yourself for overeating? Don't we all as women? Okay, but let me answer this quite honestly from my POV. The truth is yes and no. And the reason why I say no is because if I'm at a buffet or if like it's Christmas or whatever, I know that I'm about to eat the most. Like I know that I'm going to do too much and I know that I'm going to be stuffed, and it is what it is because it's the occasion. That's what's happening. But when I find that when I'm in a journey and when I'm like, okay, I'm in a phase where I'm shredding or I'm trying to lose weight or I'm trying to achieve this, and then I overeat, then that's when I feel bad and I'm like, okay, why did I do that? I overdid it. And essentially, I find myself time and time again having to remind myself that it happens, you're human, don't feel guilty. Because what ends up happening is what happens when you feel guilty is you just end up doing it again. If you feel guilty, you do it again. You feel guilty, you do it again. It just ends up being this toxic cycle. And that's something that we're going to touch on today as well. So before we go into anything when it comes to this topic, is I want us to define emotional eating, what it is actually. So I've looked at different articles and literature, and I found a very common definition of emotional eating being coping with negative emotions in such a way that you turn to foods that are energy dense or palatable. And this isn't limited to negative emotions. It can also be inclusive of positive emotions. So like eating out of joy or excitement. So the negative emotions would be eating up stress, anxiety, all of those kind of feelings. But then there's also the positive, eating out of excitement and joy. And somehow it always ends up, even if it starts as positive, it ends up going to the negative. So you eat when you're excited, eat happy and all of that. And then after that, you feel the guilt. So some way or the other, the negative emotions still end up coming in. A meta-analysis and systematic review that I found, by the way, guys, every single literature that I speak about today, I'm going to link in the bio for YouTube video. So if you're listening to this on a podcasting channel, I am so sorry. Come to YouTube and come and find the articles. But essentially, this meta-analysis found that the most common emotions that trigger emotional eating are boredom, loneliness, anxiety, and stress. And studies also link emotional eating to a high cortisol level. And essentially, cortisol, for those who don't know, is the stress hormone. So it's the flight or fight hormone. And essentially, when it is high, it increases your intake. And this happens because it interacts or interferes with those appetite hormones like leptin and ghrelin, and also intertwines with the reward system in the brain. But I say this to say, and I bring this all up to say that the truth is, and this should be your comfort in this entire thing, because now we're at a point where we're like, oh, okay, this is what's happening in my body. This is what's causing this. We're starting to understand what is causing it on a scientific level. We have yet to understand what is causing it on a real emotional level. But I say this all to say that everyone, to some extent, has indulged in emotional eating. And if you think you haven't, I promise you have. Ice cream after a breakup, popcorn at the movies. You're not hungry. You're just there, but you're just having it because it's part of the moment. It's what we do at the movies. That is an emotion. It's FOMO, essentially. Eating with, when offered food, even though you're not feeling hungry. You're eating because you want the person to feel accepted. You want it to feel like, okay, I accept what you've given me. So to some extent, one way or another, we all have engaged in emotional eating. And I want us to turn to Proverbs 23 verse 2 that says, put a knife to your throat if you are given to gluttony. And just for those who are not sure, I just want to clarify what gluttony is. So gluttony is essentially greed or overconsumption of food, or willing or wanting to overconsume food. So it says in Proverbs 23 verse 2, put a knife to your throat if you are given to gluttony. And what I take from this is not necessarily that God wants us to feel bad or guilty when we are in situations where we consume or overconsume or overeat, but rather that we should be aware of these things and actually realize that sometimes when you're in a space where you feel empty or you're really dealing with a very intense emotion, food can be an easy thing to turn to. And you can get to a point where you ask yourself, okay, I emotionally eat, so what? Why should I care? Why does this matter? And the reason why this matters is because we want freedom. We don't want to be in a place where we're depending on something like food or whatever to deal with emotions. We want to be in a place where you're able to process your emotions. And food isn't something that ends up controlling you. So we want to be in a place where essentially we take the power back. So I'm going to share with everyone a personal story. Something that I had, a personal experience of mine with emotional eating. So I found myself in a situation where I was stress eating. And how I noticed it, because I didn't just notice it and be like, no, oh my goodness, I'm stress eating now. I noticed it when I started running out of money and I started gaining weight out of nowhere. I'm like, okay, wait, what's causing me to lose money? What's causing me to gain weight? And so I noticed that when I was in a situation at work, this would typically happen at work or around work, where I had a lot on my plate, or I know that I have a lot that I need to do, I would either start the day with a sweet treat, or I would break my day, interrupt it, and go out and get something and come back, and then obviously not continue my work. And the more I tried to stop doing this, the more I ended up doing it. And I know that a lot of people can relate to this, is because the more you tell yourself, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and that's all you can fixate on, that's all you can think about. And in that moment, when I realized that I'm doing this thing, I had to remind myself, Tumi, you need to practice what you preach. You tell your patients that they need to deal with the emotion and not the food, because the food isn't the problem. The sweet treat, the donut, the cake, whatever, that isn't the problem. But the fact that you are stressed and you don't know how to process that and you don't know how to manage that, that is the thing that we need to address. So I want to point to a study that shows that this is more of actually a fun fact, that there are some people that react to cortisol more, and those are the people who are more likely to emotionally eat. And obviously there's no way of knowing that, but it's just something that I found interesting. And I also want us to turn to Psalm 34 verse 8 that says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And here we are encouraged to turn to Christ instead of turning to food in situations where we feel as though our emotions are overwhelming and they're too much for us. And so I want to share with you some solutions that have helped me, but also some things that I've advised my clients or that have helped my clients. And the first thing is a method called HALT, like stop, like HALT. And what this stands for is H, am I hungry? Am I feeling in my stomach that it's rumbling? Am I feeling that, okay, no, I need to eat something? A, am I anxious? Am I worried? Am I on edge about something? Is there anything that I'm nervous about? L, am I lonely? Is there someone that I'm missing? Is there a void that I'm trying to fill? Am I, feeling a little bit wanting, like I want company? And the T, am I tired? Am I overwhelmed? Have I had such a long day that I want to curl up on the couch and eat this ice cream? Am I like so tired and so overwhelmed that this is what I'm going to? And when we identify the feeling, that really helps, because that actually is the very first step. Recognizing it, identifying it, so that we can actually see what the next step will be. And from here, you essentially have two choices. You can either feel it, like feel the emotion, allow yourself to feel it, or express it. So obviously, to express it, you need to feed it, but you can either feed it and continue about your day, or express it, pause your day and express that particular emotion. What I found helps is to feel it, and also not to feed into the emotional eating in that particular moment, is to postpone the emotional eating. So this is something that particularly actually helped me. So I found that, okay, I'll be in the moment, I'll be like, okay, I'm working, I'm overwhelmed, a lot is happening, I feel like, oh my gosh, let me go get like a bagel or whatever. And then I'd say, okay, let me set a 30-minute timer to see in 30 minutes time when I will be feeling that I want a bagel. In the meantime, I'm going to continue my work, and I'm going to let myself feel this work anxiety and stress. And so what that helped me do is, I'm not saying no to myself. I'm saying not now. Not now. Rather push through this emotion, feel this emotion, and let's see later on if you're still feeling like you want to do that. And what ends up happening is I set a 30-minute timer, so that I can get it in 30 minutes time. When that alarm goes off, when that timer goes off, I ask myself, what was this timer for? And that goes to show that emotions are visitors. They're not residents. And you need to treat them like they're visitors. It's like, imagine your friend comes over to your place, and in your mind, you're not thinking, oh my goodness, this person is going to sleep over. You're not thinking that. You're just thinking, oh, wow, my friend is here. Let me be a good host. Let me be a decent host. And so that's essentially what I want to encourage that we do with ourselves. Treat our emotions like they're visitors and not residents, and be present with them. Another thing that helps is expressing the emotions. So this can either be sending a voice note to someone, opening a chat with yourself even, and sending a voice note to yourself that you might listen to later, you might delete, you don't even know, but you're expressing what you feel in that moment. Calling someone, journaling, praying, of course, to each their own, but find something that works for you, that allows you to pour out that emotion, so that you don't have to keep it all in or work with it by yourself. So one of the most overlooked aspects or contributors to emotional eating, and this is something that we're going to get into in detail, is childhood conditioning. This is because our eating patterns and the way that we eat, it starts from young. And I'm just reflecting, I'm thinking about myself, and I'm thinking, when I was a kid, my parents would borderline kill me if I don't finish my food. They would like threaten me. But anyway, I love them. They're cool. They're amazing parents. I wouldn't trade them for the world. But I say this to say that we're not trying to blame our parents or shame our parents, but rather I bring this up because it puts me in a state of reflecting on the past, or my past, or my upbringing, and how that has affected or contributed towards my behaviors around food today, or our behaviors around food today, and also those of my clients. And so what I want to tap into or talk about is the consequences of this, the consequences that it has when you as a child, you're told to finish your food. So the first thing that it does to you is it disconnects you from your hunger and fullness cues. When you tell a child to finish what they have eaten so that they don't get into trouble, so that, whatever it is that the consequence is they eat, they start eating, and then they start getting full. And so now their body is telling them to stop, but their mind is telling them, if I don't finish this, I'm going to be in trouble. And so what happens? They eat past the point of fullness, ignoring completely what their body is telling them. And what this does to us as adults is it puts us in a position where we have a difficulty recognizing when we're hungry, because we end up relying on external cues instead of internal cues. And external cues being things like someone has prepared food for you, they put it on the table, it's time to eat, or something like that. But essentially, you're relying on things that are outside of you rather than something that is within you that is telling you to eat. And I want to turn to Psalm 139, verse 15, that says, I praise you because I am wonderfully and fearfully made. And what this means is that God has created us very specifically with very specific hormones that are coming when you're hungry and others that settle in when you're full. He has created and designed us to be hungry and full, based on the things that we eat, based on our activity, and so on and so forth. And essentially what we do where we eat past the point of fullness, or force a child to eat past the point of fullness, is we're somehow ignoring God's design, obviously not intentionally. So again, I say this again, this is not about blame. This is about awareness. And so something that really would help is if we encourage kids to listen to their bodies instead of putting pressure on them to finish whatever it is that they're eating. The second thing that happens is food ends up being a tool of approval and disobedience. So essentially what happens is when a child feels as though when they finish their food, it earns them praise, or it helps them avoid conflict, it ends up putting them in a position where as an adult, they have people-pleasing tendencies around food, or they end up feeling guilty around food in such days. Galatians chapter 1, verse 10 says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or God? And this actually reinforces the relationship with food that we have to have, that it should not be shaped by the fear of human judgment, but rather be shaped by our natural hunger and fullness cues. And when I say people pleasing around food, it essentially means someone dished a huge portion for you and you eat it anyway, and you finish it anyway because you feel scared or worried that, this person might feel bad or feel hurt or whatever it is. So essentially you're tiptoeing around their emotions and ignoring completely your hunger and fullness cues. It's accepting a treat or whatever that someone is forcing on you, and you don't essentially want to eat it, but you say yes anyway because you had that people-pleasing tendency, because possibly a long-term consequence of, finish your food. And one of the worst things that I think that it manifested to, and for me, this is the set worse, is it may put you in a scarcity mindset. Yes, I did say it. Forcing your children to finish their food can put them as adults into a scarcity mindset. And essentially what this means is they end up developing a fear of wasting food. Or if food is left over, it gives them anxiety, or they don't feel easy. And what ends up happening is they end up feeling out of control around food. It's like, I don't know if you've ever felt the feeling where you have maybe a big packet of chips and you eat it and you eat it and you cannot stop eating it until it's finished. And that has to do a little bit with that scarcity mindset that you have deep down that might have been triggered or caused by that, childhood pressure to finish your food. But what I find beautiful about a scarcity mindset, or let me rather say, before I talk about the beautiful side of it, I want to tap a little bit on the side of it that can be a little bit dangerous, is that the scarcity mindset, it doesn't just maybe stay with the things that you eat. It can lead into other aspects of your life where you feel as though you need to seriously hold on to things because you're not going to get it again, or it's not going to come again. And I find that along with it being triggered by finish your food, it can also be triggered by having siblings. Let's be real here, guys. You have something in the fridge, your siblings will eat it immediately the second they see it. And so that also contributes to your scarcity mindset and possibly can contribute to your emotional eating later on, even though you be, maybe living by yourself and not having siblings and such that are going to like attack your takeaways the moment you put them in the fridge. But it is a factor that we need to think about. But the beautiful side about emotional eating, the beautiful aspect of the scarcity mindset is that you can unlearn it. And I think a beautiful thing about everything is that you can learn, but you can also unlearn, although it does take intention. Matthew chapter 6, verse 31 to 32 says, "Do not worry, saying, 'What shall we eat?' Your heavenly Father knows that you need them." And this directly addresses the fear around provision and food and encourages us to put trust in God, to know that God will provide, or there will always be more. And although sometimes when we overeat, it's not that we're thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm not going to have the next meal." Obviously, that's not always what we're thinking, but rather it's like an inner, deep, subconscious thought that if I don't eat this now, I'll never get a chance to eat it again. And by practicing and repeating this kind of a verse that said, "Do not worry," saying, "What shall we eat tomorrow?" it actually teaches you to get out of the scarcity mindset and think, okay, if I don't eat this food now, I can eat it later. If I say no to this person offering me this food, that's okay. I can eat it later, or I can buy another one, or I could, one day I'll be able to eat it again. It is not urgent. It is not now or never. And something that I want to encourage, because we are a village. Some of us are not parents. I'm not a parent. So, me even speaking about this, some of the parents are probably looking at me like, this girl, what does she know about parenting? What does she know about providing? Because I can imagine how stressful it is. You work, sweat and tears to provide food, put food on the table, and this child is here eating one bite and throwing it away. It's frustrating. I can imagine. But what I want to encourage or endorse from a place of being a dietitian and seeing the real life long-term consequences of this is, let's teach kids that as a parent, I decide what we eat. I decide the food that is on the table. But as a child, you will decide how much your body needs at that point in time. And because what we do when we teach children things like that, not just as parents, but also as a village, right? So we are all the village. If you know a child, any child, you're part of the village, whether you're an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, a family friend, you are part of the village. And so you need to contribute to this. And because this actually helps reduce the chances that that child in future is going to be into binge eating. It reduces the chance that they will be in situations where they feel out of control around food. But also, and very most importantly, it reduces the chance that they will end up relying on food for emotional regulation. So I want to take us to Corinthians 6 verse 12 that says, "I have the right to do anything, but not everything's beneficial. I will not be mastered by anything." Sometimes emotional eating can feel like a master. And essentially what we're taking from this is that God wants us to be free and be in a position where we break these cycles that keep us chained to emotional eating or keep us attached to emotional eating. And a very simple practice that we can start to do is eating when we're hungry and stopping when we're no longer hungry on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there are exceptions. If you go to a buffet, it's Christmas, there are times where you're probably going to overeat, But on a day-to-day practice, I'm going to stop eating because I'm not hungry anymore. And another way that emotional eating can root from childhood conditioning is through reward systems. And this is something we often don't think about. When you tell your child, if you get above 80% for your test, I'm going to take a McDonald's. Or if you get, what can I say? If you behave, I am going to buy you a cake. And so what this teaches us, or what it teaches children, is that subconsciously it teaches them that food is equal to comfort, it is equal to love, it is equal to reward and relief. And this manifests into an adult who turns to food for comfort, who turns to food for celebration, celebrating everything, can even be celebrating making it through the day. that you, at the end of the day, it's you and your ice cream. That is emotional eating if it's something that you're doing every day. And I want to turn to Psalm 34, verse 18, that says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." And what this does is it encourages us to find true comfort in God. True comfort is found in God and not in food. And although it is easier said than done, we want to move to a place where we re-anchor our emotional soothing in Him instead of in food. A 2017 study by Williams et al. Found that parental feeding practices, especially using food for comfort, are strong predictors of emotional eating in adulthood. So I found that very powerful. But I want us to take away from all of this that we are not trying to shame our parents. We're not trying to blame our parents. We're not even trying to blame ourselves if you are a parent and notice that you've done some of these things that I've mentioned. Rather, we are in, and say with me, awareness space. We're focusing on awareness. So please. Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in a way that he should go." And again, I challenge you as a community, as a village, to teach children to eat when they're hungry, to teach children to be okay, to not force them or make them feel guilty or bad when they do not finish their food or threaten them or any kind of things. It takes a village, and we are part of that village. So something that will help as well is personally reflecting on yourself. When did I start to use food for comfort? And I challenge you to rewrite that story. And know that you actually still can celebrate. We can celebrate. I mean, you can definitely celebrate with food. You know, I had a braai for my birthday just now. That is celebrating food. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we don't want to be in a place where we are relying on it for peace. Now, we have spoken about the physiology of it. We've spoken about that. The biology of emotional eating and the family and the childhood conditioning, but there's a very big topic that we haven't yet even touched on, and that is the aspect of social media. So I must admit, I do have my fair share of doom scrolling, and just scrolling it, finding and seeing the most, a lot of things, because we are actually in a culture that endorses this scroll and snack. I mean, if you look at the things that we're exposed to, we see mukbangs, you see reviews and recipes and challenges and, these restaurant reviews, and we're like, oh my goodness, I need to go there. And I just reflected, I think about a time where I was on Instagram, and I saw this video of this guy eating this guinya, and it was eating the most softest guinya ever. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need that. So what did I do immediately after work? I went to Checkers and I was like, I need that. I'm going to get it, because I knew he got it from Checkers because it looked like the water from there. So I'm like, let me go get that. When I get there, I buy it and I get home and I eat it, and I just did not feel the same satisfaction. I didn't feel the way that I thought I was going to feel. And so that shows you the power of social media and how it can influence our food choices. A 2025 study by Han et al. Explores and states that constant exposure to food images online triggers cravings and appetite. So it is not just us. It is research backed. This is something that is really happening. Romans 12 verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And I mean, it is what it is. It's a very straightforward verse, but what we can do, how we can practically apply this, is to curate our feeds. And because we know that we can click on those posts and say not interested and not interested, instead of scrolling and looking and seeing the next one and seeing the next one and being into this whirlpool of emotions where we end up wanting every single thing that we see on our phone. And if you find that you're sensitive to that, because there's nothing wrong with, loving recipes and all of these challenges and stuff like that. But if you find that is something that triggers you to emotionally eat, change your feed. Click not interested. Find something that you are interested in on social media and fill up your explore page and your content with that particular thing. So if it's cars, fashion, shoes, whatever it is, fill up your content with those things. And something else that help as well is a 24-hour fast from social media. If that's something that you find helpful, try it out. See if it helps you. See if it pulls you further away from emotional eating due to exposure of social media. And another thing that can help you slow down and reduce your likeliness to get distracted by things you see on social media, maybe as someone who eats while you watch something, is say a prayer of gratitude before your meal, and that will actually help you slow down, be present, and enjoy the meal in that particular moment. So as we close off the podcast, I want to just say that the takeaway from this is that emotional eating is not a failure in you. It is not a moral failure. In fact, it's a signal. And what it shows you is that there is something deep inside that needs to be treated, that it needs attention, whether it's that your body needs rest, whether you need comfort, whether you need peace, or spiritual hunger, connection. But what we find is that social science helps us, gives us the tools to manage it, and faith helps us find the reasons as to why we have to manage it and the strength to actually transform it. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 31 says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all in the glory of God." And our focus this week is going to be eating with awareness and not restriction. So let's rather be aware. Let's focus on attention. Let's focus on showing up. Let's focus on being sensitive to our emotion, feeding our soul before feeding our stomach. And I would love to hear from you. What is an emotion that you notice triggers you to emotionally eat the most? And is there a tip or advice that you can share that has helped you, that could possibly help others? So if you find that, please do DM me and I'll share a screenshot to my story so it can help everyone else, or leave a comment on this video if you're watching through YouTube. You've been listening to Hypocrites. This is the show where we get real about wellness and grace, and I'm Tumi. And until next time, I want you to remember, you do not need to be perfect to be at peace. Just be present and just be intentional. See you next week. Bye.